Let's talk about some Christmas wintry books. For this video specifically, I wanted to focus on different kinds of genres. Whenever I am in the mood for a winter Christmassy book, it is kind of hard to find books that I am personally interested in. Although I do try to pull from some genres, there is no romance in this. Usually when I try to search on my socials, I find so many holiday rom-coms, which I love watching, not necessarily reading. So if you are looking for a couple different recs from different genres for your winter TBR to get into the spirit of the holiday season, I have done some searching and this is the list that I have come up with. As always, I've broken them up into categories. Let's go ahead and get started. The first category is books that have been adapted into films recently. The first one that I'll start with is Eileen by Ottessa Moshfegh. This is specifically for fans of literary fiction. The film adaptation features Anne Hathaway, and this is set on the days leading up to Christmas. So we follow our main character, Eileen. She's really troubled. She's 24, doesn't have her mom. Her dad is an alcoholic, causing a lot of emotional damage. She doesn't have a close relationship with her sibling, nor does that sibling live at home. So it's basically just Eileen and her dad in this unkept house. Every time that she comes home from work, she just has to make sure that he doesn't drink and drive. She steals his shoes, she steals his car keys, and it's a constant fight. He talks down to her and belittles her and just makes her feel less than. When she's not at home, she is a secretary at a boys' prison, and her hobby right now is currently shoplifting. That is until there is a new counselor at the prison named Rebecca, which is played by Anne Hathaway. From there, the story quickly picks up its pace. The beginning is really bleak and it was quite slow to build up, but as soon as we got to that halfway mark and we meet Rebecca, everything from there just quickly spirals. I was not expecting that ending, and it's one of those books that when I finished, I was just staring at a blank wall trying to process what I had read. But this is by far my favorite Ottessa Moshfegh. I have read My Year of Rest and Relaxation, Make Glue, her short story collection, and I really did not like them, but this one I really love. Then we have Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. I added this book to my list as soon as I heard that Cillian Murphy was going to be in the film adaptation. I really love Peaky Blinders, or really anything that Cillian Murphy is in. This book is set in a small Irish town. The year is 1985, and we're also following the days leading up to Christmas. Our main character is a coal merchant who makes this discovery. It brings up his past and it complicates his present, with the town being controlled by the church. What I also like about this book is that it's really short and it's only 118 pages, so it's a really quick read. And I have heard a lot of good things about the author, so I'm really looking forward to this one. And then the other book that I have is Little Women. I have watched both film adaptations. I do love both of them, but there is something about Greta Gerwig's film adaptation that I personally just love just a bit more, or a lot a bit more. This is the one time that I broke my rule. My general rule of thumb is I read the book first and then I watch the film. What ended up happening was I really didn't think that I would ever read the book, so I watched the film, cried for 2 hours or however long that movie is, and then the very next day, I went to the bookstore and I bought the book because I am so excited to read it and annotate it. And there's something about those March sisters. They have such a special place in my heart. This really tore at my heartstrings, and I love Greta Gerwig's adaptation of it because of how she sets up the scenes with the past and the present, and that is what made me so emotional. I had heard so many of these lines in social media and I just never pieced them together that they were all from Little Women. I feel like if I had known that, I would have read it sooner. I am really looking forward to reading this. I'm hoping to read it in December during the Christmas time, reading the book, rewatching the film. I am so excited. Have read this, and if you have seen both film adaptations, I'm curious which one you prefer more than the other, or which March sister you like the most. My personal favorite is Jo, but I would love to know yours. Now moving on to specifically just literary fiction. The first book is All's Well by Mona Awad. I feel it is very appropriate to add a Mona Awad somewhere in this list. I wanted to go ahead and talk about this one. With All's Well, we cover a character named Miranda. Miranda used to be an actress. She loved being on stage. One day she has this awful accident and she ends up having chronic back pain. So she has to retire being an actress. She ends up becoming a teacher at this theater program at some school. The thing is, the program is really run down. It's not well kept. This year they're doing this Shakespeare play, but it's really hard for her to focus because this pain has pretty much just absorbed and taken over all of her life. People around her really have just become desensitized to it, or just never really believed this pain that she feels, and it's so hard for her to express it to others that don't know what chronic pain is like. Her marriage is falling apart. There's just a lot of factors at play, but one day Miranda goes into this bar. She meets these 3 men. From then on, she no longer has pain. The chronic pain is slept away along with her dependency on painkillers, and it's like she's living a totally new life. She loves it. If you are the type of person that loves to feel like you're losing your mind along with the characters, and this is going to be perfect for you. Also, if you've read Shakespeare, you'll probably pick up on a lot more little details in this and appreciate it more. I honestly never have, so all those little things just went right over my head, but I really enjoyed the book as a whole. Out of all the Mona Awad books, I feel like this one is talked about the least, but I really thoroughly enjoyed it. The next book I don't have a physical copy of. This one is on my personal TBR, but it is All the Lovers in the Night. From this author, I have read Heaven. That book is so sad. It talks about bullying and different perspectives that these two young children have on bullying. It is really sad and bleak, but I loved the writing and I've been wanting to read something from that author since. This one would be the next one that I have my personal eye on. In this book, we follow a character who is a proofreader. She's working at this company, but her friend offers her a freelance position to do proofreading for them. She agrees, which sounds good, but now instead of working in an office space surrounded by other people, she doesn't have that anymore, and so she starts to feel really lonely and isolated until she meets a certain someone, starts to change some things around for her. This book is said to be really mundane, which personally I don't mind, and it's also said that the writing is really rich and luscious in detail, which I really love. So it's not going to be for everyone, but I do have high hopes and I do think I am going to ultimately really enjoy it. Moving on to some thrillers, I have 3 different ones. The first one is Girl in Snow. This is from the same author that wrote Notes on an Execution, which is one of my favorite books. And what I love is that they follow very similar frameworks for how the story is told. So we do follow 3 different perspectives, but the interesting thing about Girl in Snow, this one revolves around a high school murder case. 3 different perspectives that we follow in this one is the boy who loved her, the girl that wanted to be her, and the officer assigned to the investigation. I haven't personally read this book, but because I love Notes on an Execution so much, I do have high hopes. It follows a similar storyline, so I feel like I'll be in really good hands. And the overall setting of the book falls within the winter Christmassy time. The next book is I'm Thinking of Ending Things. This is probably the 3rd or 4th time I've added this book to a video, but it's snowing in the book and it's winter Christmassy. It fit the theme, okay? But if you haven't heard me mention it before, I'm Thinking of Ending Things. We follow a couple in the car. They are headed to meet the boyfriend's family. They live in this secluded area. There's really not many neighbors around. Talking on the way there, this and that, and everything seems relatively normal until they get to the boyfriend's house. She starts to look around, notice a couple weird things, hears a couple odd things, goes down to the basement and sees even weirder things. This is one of the only books that gave me a physical reaction. My palms were sweating, I felt my heart racing. I was sitting on the edge of my chair when I was reading it, and I read all of this in one sitting. It used to be on Kindle Unlimited. I'm not 100% if it still is. I also just realized I could have added this to the film adaptation category. I haven't seen the film, but I'm just gonna keep it in the thrillers, okay? If you wanna watch it, go ahead and feel free. Some people prefer the book over the film and vice versa. I think that's always going to be the case. For this book specifically, let me know which version you prefer. Next up, we have Drive Your Plow Over the Dead. This is a book cover that I have seen so many times, and initially I was never interested in it. I never picked it up because I continued to see it over and over and over again. All of a sudden it piqued my interest, so I looked into it, and I guess it worked because it's now on my TBR. The main character in this one is a 60-year-old Polish woman who prefers animals to people. I agree with her on that one, and she does live in a small little hunting town. Never underestimate a small town though, because she ends up bearing witness to a lot of random murders that end up happening all throughout her neighborhood, and she has a theory that the people that are committing the murders are not actual people but the animals themselves, because they're just tired of being hunted. As an animal lover, the concept quite intrigued me. This is translated from Polish, and it is said to be a blend between a thriller and a fairy tale, so I'm really intrigued about this one. A classic that I love more and more as the years go on, I think just because of like the nostalgic element that it has, but for me it is The Nutcracker. It is a really, really short book. Really can't go wrong with it, but if you don't necessarily want to read a classic and you want to read something inspired by it, a little bit of a retelling, I have found 3 different books, all inspired by The Nutcracker. They all vary just a little bit, so depending on what you're looking for, one of these might work out for you. So the first one is Midnight in Everwood. Out of the 3, this one follows a Nutcracker storyline the closest, and I saw someone online recommend this book in particular for people that like the Night Circus. I haven't seen it. I haven't read it. I know it is a really popular one, so if that's something that you've enjoyed in the past, then you might be interested in the Midnight in Everwood. Now, if you prefer something a little darker, then I would recommend you check out The Kingdom of Sweets. This one is a dark retelling version. We follow 2 twin sisters, and they are separated from by their godfather. They are assigned, you are dark, and you are light. On Christmas Eve, they end up traveling to the Kingdom of Sweets. One of them ends up getting a bargain, and the other one has to suffer the consequences. This one sounds more plot driven. And then the last one is the Enchanted Sonata. This one sounds so cozy. When I heard people talking about it, the writing just sounded really atmospheric. It made me feel like it's the kind of book that I want to pick up when it's raining outside, or for those lucky people that actually get to experience snow. It could be a snow day for you. You grab your blanket and your coffee or your tea, and you light the candles, you get really cozy, and you just get to enjoy this book and just get escaped into the world. The twist in this one is that Claire has to face off with a magician who uses his magic, and the way that he's able to cast spells is through music. Now, if you're looking for a book that is going to make you cry, this is the author that every single time without fail, I have cried. Sometimes I do a really bad, heavy cry. Sometimes it's just my eyes watering up. It does not matter. It also doesn't matter how many pages he has. The trilogy just broke my heart and shattered it into a million pieces. I've also read a really short story from him, I think around 65 pages or less, and I bawled my eyes out. The man is consistent, you gotta give him that. It is Frederick Bachman, so if you want the trilogy, then it is the Beartown, just the Beartown. It's the Beartown trilogy. You can definitely read the first book as a standalone. Thing is, you're more than likely going to fall for these characters, so you're just gonna keep going back. So then you get the second book, and then the final book is pretty much just like these two combined. And I held off on reading that third book for so long because something happens to my favorite character. And it's not even a spoiler. The way that Frederick Bachman writes, if you haven't read any of his books before, he kind of gives you like a very vague foreshadowing in chapter 1, and then never brings it up again until until book 3, the very end of the trilogy, and then he brings it full circle. So you kind of have an idea roughly of what could happen with certain characters. It's never confirmed until the very end, and that's why I held off on reading that final book, because my heart just could not handle it. I really never thought that I would be so interested in a hockey town book. The setting fits the winter Christmassy feel. It's surrounded by snow, it's cold, but it also pulls at your heartstrings, how I feel the holiday season does. There are so many different POVs in this, and that kind of made me a bit hesitant to start, because I don't really do good with a lot of POVs. The less for me personally, the better. It was so easy to follow along with this series. It felt like I knew the whole town, and it was really easy for me to jump from one POV to the other, to the other, to the other. And I really liked it that way. It made me feel more connected to this town, and it made it feel like the town is real and it's genuine, and it made me want to go support that hockey team. But if you don't want to read the first book, if you don't want to read the trilogy as a whole, then I recommend you read his short story, The Deal of a Lifetime. This is a one that's only 65 pages, and in this one we follow a father and a son who went many years no contact. All of a sudden they are reestablishing contact. There is something about another character with cancer. Feels high stakes because they're running out of time. The cover has a full-on Christmas tree on it, so it's very perfect for this time of year. And like I said, it is guaranteed to make you cry. Moving on to some short stories. I haven't read these personally, so I'm not able to vet them, but I have 3 different ones. The first one would be Spirits of the Season Christmas Haunting. The next one is Gothic Horror Short Stories. It just has a lot of the classic writers like Edgar Allan Poe, Sheridan Le Fanu, Mary Shelley, and so many others. And look at how it looks on the inside. And the last one is The Haunting Season Ghostly Tale for Long Winter Nights. I think the covers in these two are beautiful, just haven't read them. These are more on the darker, heavier side of short stories, which are my personal favorite. And to end the video, we are going to do some fantasy books. So I have 3 different ones. And again, I'm going to talk about the one that I've probably talked about the most on here, and it is The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. I am obsessed with this book because it is so atmospheric. I don't read that much fantasy, but when I do, I want to feel like I'm being teleported into this world with you, and I am just completely surrounded by it. The writing is purple prose, and it gives you just that. We follow Indigo. She is an heiress. She ends up marrying this man, and throughout the book, we know the man as the bridegroom, which I love. And the chapters change from the bridegroom's perspective back to one of Indigo's old childhood friends. Before Indigo and the bridegroom end up getting married, she has one rule for him, and it is don't talk about my past. At this point, they are like in this little bubble and cocoon of happiness, so he doesn't really care. He says, fine, I don't really care about your past. Let's just get married and stay in the present. So that's what ends up happening until her aunt one day calls her and says, you have to come back to the childhood home. There is something going on and I need you here now. So the bridegroom goes with Indigo back to the home, and then one of those days when he's roaming the halls, it feels a bit weird weird, saying that it feels kind of like the house is whispering and luring him in further and further until he ends up uncovering a lot about the past. It's so descriptive and luscious and beautiful, and I'm obsessed. The other two are absolutely, again, just as rich in detail. Next we have House of Hunger. So if you want something just a bit darker, this is for the people that have read about Elizabeth Bathory, the Hungarian heiress. Is she an heiress? She was something special, I'll tell you that. But basically, this book is inspired by her. We have the people that live in the South that are really struggling. It feels like they were just given pennies and they really can't make ends meet. And then we have the people in the North that kind of hoard all the luxury and the beauty for them. So if you really want to make money, you travel to the North. And that's what happens one day with their main character. She sees a job posting to become a blood maid up in the North. They pay really good, incredible benefits. And she says, great, you can have all the blood that you need. Because basically the people in the North believe that if you drink the blood, it helps you with your overall health. You can retain youth and beauty, so they start hiring these blood maids. There is one person in particular that kind of vets the blood out, and they say that the more trauma you've experienced, then the richer your blood is. And then he kind of helps decide which house you go to. So our main character gets assigned to the House of Hunger. There she meets all the other blood maids, and she gets used to her new life that promises all the beauty and the riches. At least that's what she was told. The chapter that I remember so vividly is when she is traveling from the South to the North. It kind of felt like the Polar Express, just a little bit, not too much, but just how detailed it was and all the food that she was finally able to eat. So I really, really loved that. And this one is more of a dark and twisty kind of book. They are not technically vampires, but there is some blood sucking and a bit of sapphic tones into it as well. Not a bit, quite a lot. And this one was really, really good. And then finally we have Belladonna by Adeline Grace. I don't have the dust jacket, but I feel like I really don't need to because this book just speaks for itself. It is stunning. One of the most beautiful books that I have ever owned. I have not read Foxglove, which is a continuation to this, which is why I haven't purchased the third book either, but I kind of want to just for the sole purpose of how beautiful the cover is. I know that's kind of bad, but they are just stunning. And as beautiful as it is on the outside, the writing is equally as beautiful. In this book, we follow a character named Signa. Signa did not have an easy childhood. It was very tumultuous. One day, she ends up traveling over to meet this estranged family. She starts getting her new life just basically set up again from the ground up, but it's kind of hard to do, and she feels this heavy presence that's always around. This presence ends up being Death because he is a character in this, which I really loved that. As the other books that I've mentioned, it is so rich in detail, but if that's not enough for you, there's also a murder mystery subplot that's going on. The ending of this is such a good cliffhanger. When I read it, I felt like I needed the second book immediately. You're trying to figure out all these characters, the role that they play in everything. There's also a big ball that they end up planning. Signa's talking to Death all the time, and you're trying to figure out his involvement. This is a YA, or is it a new adult? I think people kind of go back and forth on it. If you've read 2 and 3 after this, let me know if I should give Foxglove another shot. I do have it on my shelves, but I can definitely vouch for the first one, and I really enjoyed it. So those were all the books that I wanted to talk about today. Let me know which one of these caught your interest, and thank you so much for watching.